Alright everyone, the duel is over, and we'll see who the winner is in Chapter 25, Peace and Reconciliation. So let's read. Some time passed while Plucky and Caesar sat motionless in silence, staring at the smoldering remains of the sawmill. Eventually the storm conceded as it passed, and eventually only a light rain remained. The heap of burned wood and melted metal still had a faint glow of a fierce red underneath it, and still smoked excessively, though it was also steam from the rain falling upon it. Both the red and grey fox sat there transfixed by the smoldering wreckage. Hard to believe they were just in that former building. It was another few minutes before they had finally caught their breath back. Well, at least the building was abandoned. Plucky spoke randomly, trying to break the ice. After a small period of silence, Caesar responded. Why? Caesar muttered to him. What? You could have easily left me there to die. Why did you save me? Caesar asked sincerely. Plucky was silent for a moment. You live by your laws, Plucky proclaimed calmly. I live by mine. Caesar chuckled slightly. We really aren't so different. In only that one trait. Otherwise we are completely different, Plucky rejoined harshly. Caesar was taken aback a bit. However, he could more than understand Plucky's harsh tone, as he had previously been trying to kill him, and very nearly did. However, there was no intention for that now. The only hostility between them so far as Caesar was concerned was verbally, and he continued nonetheless. I'll admit, you have my utmost respect. You fought very bravely and vigorously. And you were right. I did underestimate you. But just because you saved my life doesn't make us friends, nor does it make us allies. But it does mean you are no longer my enemy, Caesar said. Both foxes stared at the other for a moment. So where do we stand on the deal? Plucky asked unemotionally, because I was half expecting you to lunge at me again. Plucky, I may be considered many things, but dishonorable is not one of them. I'll adhere to your terms, Caesar stated. You and Scarlet can live in peace, and I and my troop will not set foot in White Deer Park again. You're conceding? Just like that? Plucky asked, a bit confused. Well, by default you did win the duel, and not only spared, but saved my life, Caesar explained. As bewildering as I find it, holding to your terms is the least I can offer. But you may also ask one more thing of me. Plucky thought for a moment what more he could ask from his old adversary. Then he remembered Scarlet tell him of her brother's sacrifice for her, and he knew that he was still alive. Plucky soon spoke his request. Rebel, Scarlet's brother, his freedom, and safety too. Caesar was silent for a moment before he spoke. Very well, I shall see to it, he said conclusively. Though first, we probably need to get back to our own kin. I think I know the way back. Follow me. Plucky gestured as he went to head back towards the river, Caesar following. 14 Sleepyhead09, you are a genius. This story is so amazing! If only I'd gotten started on this sooner. Wow. That journey back to the old arena for their duel was going to be one Plucky and Caesar remembered for the rest of their lives. Mainly for the reason that only moments before they were arch enemies. But now spoke between them as if they were good friends. Stories were shared and told, and even laughter broke out a couple of times. It was certainly a weird time for both of them. By the time they had reached the boundary fence for White Deer Park, the storm had fully passed, and the rain too had finally stopped. The sun began to spear bright rays of light through the dense gray cloud layer. The whole world suddenly felt much brighter and calmer. It was late afternoon by the time Plucky and Caesar had reached the place where they had previously fought each other. To their surprise, everyone was still there, and now the rest of the Grey Troop was there too, as well as Scarlet's brothers, rebels still under guard. Caesar entered the clearing first and barked loudly to make his presence known. There was a brief moment where Scarlet, Whisper, Fox, and Perry feared the worst. That was until Plucky came walking behind Caesar and stood next to him. All of them could see the state they were both in. It seemed that the outcome of the duel was inconclusive, considering both of them were alive.
"The duel is over!"
Caesar announced loudly.
"Amicably! Plucky and Scarlet are free to live in peace!"
There was some muttering of confusion between the Grey Troop, until Caesar explained the more detailed outcome of the duel, where Plucky had ended up saving his life from the blazing inferno of the sawmill. Caesar was too proud to admit it was embarrassing to have lost the duel, but he had no worry that he would lose influence over his followers. He was a respected and influential leader, nonetheless. Scarlet wasted no time in running over to Plucky, and they immediately nuzzled the other affectionately for a while. Caesar almost smiled before he went to join his troop, leaving the Fox and Vixen to reconcile. Fox, Whisper, and Perry watched them happily, and after a period of loving nuzzling, Scarlet soon decided to speak. "Are you okay?" she stuttered. "You look like crap." "Oh, thanks," Plucky replied sarcastically yet jokily, but then Scarlet hit him over the head lightly. "Ow!" She then cuddled up to him. "I know why you did what you did, Scarlet subbed into Plucky's ruff. "But don't you dare scare me like that ever again! I couldn't bear to lose you!" She then paused as she consoled herself to stop crying. "I love you." "I love you too," Plucky replied tenderly. "But can I request that you not hit me over the head anymore?" he joked. "Only when you deserve it for being an idiot," Scarlet joked back. "That's as good as it's gonna get, isn't it?" "Pretty much," Scarlet smiled, before playfully licking Plucky's muzzle. He smiled back and nuzzled her again, gently and lovingly. "Yeah, Plucky, you didn't really have enough time to tell her that you were going to push yourself off the cliff into the river with Caesar and hopefully survive, but you still scared her. You gotta get the punishment." On the other side of the clearing, Caesar approached the two foxes guarding Rebel. He was sitting up with his head down, still with the bloodstains on his fur. Not even the rain had washed it out. He wondered, of course, what was to become of him. He was soon to find out.
"Release him!"
Caesar ordered the two guards. Rebel's ears perked up, and he looked up at Caesar with a look of bewilderment.
"Go on.
Plucky has bargained for your freedom," Caesar spoke calmly. Rebel immediately stood up and walked away without a word and without looking back. He was no longer a prisoner with a death sentence. He was a free fox. He walked over towards Plucky and Scarlet. They saw him walk over and both turned to greet him, though Rebel spoke first. He was still a bit confused how Plucky had bargained for his freedom too, but he was more concerned with thanking him than anything else. He'd pretty much just saved his life. "So you bargained for my freedom," Rebel said almost bewilderedly. "Thank you." "It's I who should be thanking you," Plucky announced. "Scarlet told me what you did for her at the river. I wouldn't know what would have happened if you didn't—"
"Oh, Rebel! Your eye!"
Scarlet interrupted as she noticed Rebel's blood-stained eye socket. His eyelid was closed. obviously concealing what was remaining of his ravaged and mutilated left eye. Courtesy of you probably know who, Rebel replied sardonically. Scarlet then went to lick it to soothe it. Sorry guys, but Rebel shrugged it off. It's okay, really. Thankfully I have spare. He chuckled lightly, and then he turned back to Plucky. We haven't actually formally met. No, but I know enough about you to feel like I have. Plucky smiled. Why? What has she said about me? Rebel asked anxiously, looking between Plucky and Scarlet. Nothing bad, Rebel, Scarlet stated cheerily. Well, that's all right then, Rebel smiled wildly. Back at the other side of the bare stone clearing, Prowler and Scamp watched as their younger brother and sister were reunited. They shared a look, and quite suddenly, the two remaining red foxes among the grey troop soon segregated themselves and began walking away. Caesar soon noticed Prowler and Scamp's imminent departure. Just where do you two think you're going? Caesar called to them. If you haven't noticed already, Caesar, Prowler spoke back almost harshly, this new deal you have made makes the one we made over a year ago annulled. In my recollection, that means we can go as we please. Caesar thought for a moment. Prowler was indeed right, and their actions were justified. They now no longer owed him any loyalty. You are right. Very well. Go as you please. As Prowler and Scamp walked away, Plucky, Scarlet, and Rebel noticed Scamp turn to speak briefly to Prowler. The two of them stopped, and Prowler just looked over to them, and Scamp began to walk calmly over. His head was low in a sort of remorse. His intention, to make peace with his younger brother and sister, because, even after all the quarrels and hate exchanged between them, they were still family after all. Scamp soon stood before them, and instead turned to Plucky. This may go against everything you might think of me, but take care of them, Scamp muttered to Plucky. Scamp, you don't have to go with him. Scarlet grabbed his attention, referring to Prowler, who still overlooked from a distance. I do. Someone's got to watch his back, Scamp replied. And I, just wanted to say I'm sorry. Not that it means much, but you don't need me around anymore. And definitely not Prowler. Then good luck. And I guess, goodbye. Rebel spoke almost solemnly before finishing with a small smile. I only wish we could have actually met on better terms, Plucky. Scamp turned back to him. As do I, Plucky replied. Well, take care, Scamp uttered to them all before he turned to join Prowler. The two brothers then took off swiftly. No definite destination in mind, but they went off together and soon disappeared from view through the greenery. Neither knew whether they would see each other again, but there was no doubt in any of their minds they were where they were supposed to be. Prowler, Scamp, Rebel, and Scarlet were never always the closest family, but at least they departed on moderately good terms. Across the clearing, Caesar was mustering his troop to leave. Wherever their destination lay, it wasn't here. Standing almost in solitude, Tyron was watching the troop gather for their departure. Everything was changing, and he didn't like it. He looked at Plucky with pure hatred. It was all his fault, and Tyron was furious that his own father hadn't killed him when he had the chance. While Plucky's back was turned on him, he decided to do what his father had not, and he leaped, teeth and claws bared towards Plucky, who was completely unaware of his attacker. However, as Tyron was midair, he was swept sideways by a red vixen and was held down forcefully by her. It was Whisper, who had noticed the Grey Fox's imminent attack and instinctively went for her son's aid. Summoning a maternal superstrength that the Tyrann quickly subdued on the floor. Quite an embarrassment to him. The scuffle had been brought to the attention of everyone present. Some of the Grey Foxes entered the fighting stance, but Caesar ordered them to stand down.
Go, Whisper! Jeez, I wish Fleet was around. He could have seen that.
What is the meaning of this?
Caesar shouted out upon seeing the scuffle.
Your son was about to commit an indiscretion against mine, Whisper snapped back.
I see, Caesar said as he gave Tyrann a stern look of disapproval. He didn't even sound surprised. He knew well enough his son often did reckless and aggressive acts. This was no exception. Soon he reprimanded.
Tyrann, here now!
Tyrann huffed aggressively, as Whisper let him go, giving her a cruel look of fury, which of course she returned. Tyrann then turned to Plucky, Scarlet, and Rebel with the same cruel look. Let me be clear. Tyrann spoke callously to Plucky. You may have made a deal with my father, but not with me. And he isn't going to live forever. Plucky said nothing in reply, and stayed quiet with a stern look as the Grey Fox turned to join his troop. In that moment, Tyrann had an epiphany. In his mind, there was no respect for his father anymore as he was briefly disciplined. He may have revered his father's malice, but saw his compassion as a weakness. He believed that due to the actions against his troop, those red foxes needed to be punished, but there was no way to do that while his father was still in command, not after the treaty that had been made. He planned to overthrow him, but that wouldn't be easy. The rest of the Grey Foxes revered Caesar for his leadership and authority. Tyrann would bide his time and wait for the opportune moment. And Tyrann is going to get the shit kicked out of him either by Plucky or Caesar. Either way, I think he's going to be an antagonist in the future. Back at the far side of the clearing, the Red Foxes, Plucky, Scarlet, Rebel, Fox, and Whisper, and a single solitary peregrine falcon, Perry, watched as the Grey troop began to follow their leader, gradually disappearing through the trees to go on and live their own lives. He really is a monster. Plucky couldn't help but comment on Tyrann's actions. But now they're gone. For good. Rebel spoke to reassure all of them. It was much of a relief for all of them to hear that now, finally, Plucky and Scarlet and their unborn cubs, and now Rebel too, were safe. Soon all the Grey Foxes had departed, and only Caesar remained visible. He looked at Plucky before giving him a respectful nod of harmony, which Plucky gladly returned, an ultimate and absolute symbol to the end of their enmity. Caesar turned and left to go lead his troop, and after the last glimpse of grey fur disappeared through the greenery of the shrubs and trees, Plucky soon spoke to all of them. Well then, he sighed happily, before continuing with a smile. Let's go home. And let's end this in the final chapter. A promise made, a promise kept. See you guys for the final part of the Animals of Farthing Wood, the journey of a lifetime. Until then, remember the oath and thank your lucky stars. A happy ending is in sight.